I once heard of a place few have seen, a place whispered about in remote villages, a place that exists somewhere between memory and myth. They call it the Hidden Valley, a stretch of land concealed by the very mountains that guard it. You won't find it on any map, and those who claim to have been there rarely speak of what they saw. Or perhaps, what saw them. Travelers speak of an unmarked path deep within Yosemite National Park, just beyond the tourist trails, where shadows seem to reach out, lingering just a moment too long. Those who wander down it, even for a single step, say they feel something, an unease, like they're being watched. I'd always thought these were stories, mere campfire tales told to thrill and unnerve, until I went there myself. The first thing you notice is the silence. It's thick, almost oppressive, as if nature itself holds its breath, waiting. But it's not just any silence. It's a void that drowns out even the rustling of leaves or the distant calls of birds. And then, from somewhere in the mist, you hear them. Whispers that ebb and flow, just faint enough to make you question if they're real. Words that feel like secrets shared just beyond the reach of understanding. They say those whispers belong to the lost, to travelers who ventured too far, to those who thought they'd be the ones to escape the valley's curse. I took another step, feeling the mist wrap around me like fingers drawn to warmth. I could sense it, a presence, or maybe many. People talk about strange phenomena in places like this, places untouched by time. Some believe the land remembers, that it holds the echoes of everyone who ever walked upon it. Here, in Hidden Valley, it feels as though the very rocks and trees are charged with something. Something old, something watching. I'd been warned not to go alone. Local guides spoke of an uneasiness that grew as they approached, a feeling that gnawed at them to turn back. A foreboding that drove some to flee without looking back. But I had to know. I had to see what was hidden, what lay beyond that veil of mist. And as I took that step, as the valley closed around me, I felt it. A heaviness, as though I had crossed an invisible line, one that couldn't be uncrossed. There are places in this world meant to remain hidden, places where reality slips and something else takes hold. The Hidden Valley is one of those places. A place that leaves its mark on those who enter, a place few survive and none forget. There are places that hold stories, and then there are places that are stories. Tales etched into their soil, whispered by the wind and guarded by shadows. Hidden Valley is one of these places. And if you listen closely, you might hear the legends that have been buried here, forgotten by most, but never truly gone. Centuries ago, before the land was ever part of a national park, before it was claimed by anyone, the valley was known to the indigenous tribes of the Sierra Nevada as a forbidden land. The few elders who would speak of it said the valley was cursed, a place where dark rituals had taken place. It was a space reserved for the spirits, those who had passed, and those who had been taken. As the legend goes, the valley was once a sanctuary, a hallowed ground, until an event, the details of which have been lost to time, turned it into something far darker. Some say it was an act of desperation during a great famine. Others whisper of an unspeakable ritual meant to appease the mountain spirits, one involving a sacrifice. The specifics remain vague, yet everyone seems to agree on one thing: the land itself had been changed. Over the years, accounts of strange happenings grew. People who ventured too close spoke of unnatural shadows flickering across the trees, of voices calling out in languages they didn't understand. There were whispers of spectral lights drifting through the mist, figures that appeared and vanished as quickly as they were seen. Then came the disappearances. In the late 1800s, during the height of the California gold rush, two prospectors stumbled upon the valley. Searching for veins of gold, they camped near the valley's edge, marking it on their maps. The next day, only one of them emerged, delirious and barely able to speak. He rambled about shadows in the mist, about figures who seemed to follow them, their eyes hollow and cold. He spoke of his partner, who was taken by the valley. Over the next decades, others went missing. Hikers, hunters, even entire search parties. Their trails would lead into the valley, only to vanish at a certain point. No bodies were ever found, and no clues ever surfaced. Local legends grew, each one more disturbing than the last. It wasn't long before people began to avoid the valley altogether, calling it cursed, a place marked by death. But what exactly happened in those shadowed cliffs, those hidden groves that turned it into a place of fear? Why do people who venture inside feel as though something unseen is guiding their steps, drawing them deeper, as if the valley itself were alive? Could it be that those ancient spirits are still here, that their voices echo through the trees, pulling in anyone who dares to listen? I spent weeks researching the stories, combing through old newspapers and forgotten archives, finding records that didn't quite make sense. Each account was similar: an encounter with something unexplainable, something that seemed to defy the natural order. And each time, the valley's legend grew darker, more ominous. There's a rumor that deep within the valley, hidden in one of its crevices, lies an ancient altar. Some say it's covered in markings no one can decipher, that those symbols belong to another world, a language older than time itself. It's said that anyone who sees it will understand, will feel its pull. But no one has ever returned to confirm the stories. Is it just a tale, woven to keep trespassers away? Or could there be a kernel of truth, some dark force still lingering, waiting to claim the next soul who dares to enter? I pose this question to you. What do you think? Could there truly be a curse here? Or is it merely the work of an overactive imagination, brought to life by isolation and fear? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. Do you believe in curses? And if you had the chance, would you dare to step into Hidden Valley yourself? I set out to retrace the steps of Thomas Redding, the 19th century explorer, whose name became synonymous with both ambition and mystery. Redding, a figure as stubborn as he was brave, ventured into Hidden Valley during the spring of 1876, a time when whispers about the cursed land were as common as stories of gold and fortune. He carried with him a leather-bound journal, a quill, and a confidence that would soon be tested in ways he could not have imagined. The journal he kept would later be found, waterlogged and torn, half buried in the mud near the valley's edge, weeks after he disappeared. Its pages, fragile and smudged, tell a story that leaves more questions than answers. A story of a man who entered the heart of darkness and never returned. Day 1. The path is narrow, and the trees stand like silent sentinels. No sound reaches me here. Not the call of birds, not the rustle of squirrels. It is as if the forest holds its breath, waiting. But for what? That night, Redding wrote of the strange sensation that crept over him as the sky bled into twilight. I felt a cold that no fire could chase away, he scrawled. A chill that came from within the earth itself, seeping up through the soles of my boots and into my bones. The darkness here is not like any I have known. It moves. It was on this night that Redding first mentioned the sounds, the phantom footsteps. At first I thought it an animal, he wrote, the ink blotted and hurried. A deer perhaps, curious of the intruder in its domain. But when I stood still, the steps did not cease. They grew louder, then softer, moving in circles, as if testing me. By the second day, Redding's handwriting had shifted from confident strokes to erratic, shaking lines. He wrote, "The mist thickens with each step. I cannot see the sun, though I know it must be overhead. The air is suffocating, drenched in a silence so profound it has weight. I hear them more clearly now, voices that drift on the wind, speaking a language I do not understand. Yet somehow, I know they are calling my name." Night falls faster here, Redding noted. The shadows stretch and twist, merging until the forest is one great black mass. The fire sputters as though starved of air, and I swear I see shapes just beyond its glow, shapes that flicker and shift. He could not sleep that night. He wrote of lying on the cold ground, eyes wide, ears straining for every rustle, every faint murmur. I cannot escape the feeling that I am being watched. Their eyes press upon me from all sides, piercing, unseen yet known. I wish I could say I have not felt fear like this before, but I have. And I know that this time, it is different. Day 3. I must be losing myself to this place. The mist does not relent, and the path I came in by has vanished. I hear them now, clearer than before, whispers in the night, saying things I cannot repeat. I see their outlines, pale as bone, watching, waiting. I can feel them watching me. I am not alone here. Hidden Valley has drawn more than its share of attention over the years. In the modern era, where stories are documented and shared at lightning speed, the valley's chilling tales have become a magnet for those seeking proof of the unknown. Paranormal investigators, thrill seekers, and skeptics alike. Yet even with today's technology, what they encounter often leaves more questions than answers. One account came from Hannah Wells, an experienced hiker and amateur filmmaker who ventured into the valley with her camera equipment and a head full of skepticism. "I didn't expect much," she later admitted. "Just an eerie atmosphere, maybe a good story to tell. But what I found, well, that's something else." It was around sunset when the first strange event occurred. Hannah's video shows her stopping, suddenly alert, her head turning sharply to the right as if hearing something just out of view. "Did you hear that?" she whispers, her breath shallow and audible. Her friend, visibly uneasy, mutters a dismissive, "Probably just the wind." Hannah's recount of that moment was stark. It wasn't just hearing my name, it was how it was said. Like someone knew me, someone who shouldn't be there. "We left soon after that, or tried to," she continues, voice dropping. "But the trail that led us in seemed different. No matter which way we turned, the path looped back into the mist. That's when the electronics started to fail. My camera, our phones, even the flashlight flickered. We were trapped for what felt like hours until suddenly everything cleared and we found ourselves at the entrance as if nothing had happened. But we knew it had." Gregory Holt, the leader of the investigation group Echoes of the Unknown, described an experience that haunted him long after. "We came prepared," he said, tapping on the metal casing of his handheld recorder. "We didn't expect a ghost story to turn real, but it did." They set up near what they believed to be the center of the valley, placing their equipment strategically to capture both audio and visual anomalies. It was all quiet at first, then, just after midnight, everything changed. It wasn't just what we saw, but what we heard, Gregory recounts, leaning forward. Voices, dozens of them, muttering things we couldn't understand, and then one, louder than the rest, called out clearly, "Leave now." But the valley isn't just known for voices or figures. More than one visitor has reported the eerie feeling of being touched, light brushes against the back of the neck or a hand on the shoulder, only to turn and find nothing but mist. Paul Jensen, a solo hiker with years of experience, described it as a cold touch, almost like ice, that left a numb, tingling sensation. He paused before adding, "I wasn't sure if I should run or stay perfectly still. Every instinct told me I wasn't alone." And then there was Angela Ruiz, a wildlife photographer who ventured into Hidden Valley for its rumored untouched beauty. What she captured, however, was far from natural. "I was focusing on the branches, the light filtering through in this eerie way, when I noticed something shift in the frame," Angela said, holding up a printed photograph. "I thought it was smoke at first, but it was a figure. And when I looked up, there was nothing there." What would you do if you heard your own name whispered from the depths of that mist? Would you dismiss it as imagination, or listen to the voice that calls from the unknown? Would you dare to step into Hidden Valley and face what lies beyond the veil? Hidden Valley holds many stories, each more disturbing than the last. The accounts are whispered in hushed voices, passed from those who managed to leave with trembling hands and haunted eyes. Some who dared to enter were never the same again, while others were never seen again at all. It was a cold October evening when Aaron Callister, an avid outdoorsman, decided to venture into the valley. He had heard the stories, but like many before him, he dismissed them as folklore meant to keep the curious away. The deeper he walked, the thicker the mist became, curling around him like a living thing. He described the sensation in vivid detail later. "I felt a pressure, not on my chest, but in my mind, as if something unseen had reached inside and claimed a piece of my thoughts." Aaron wasn't alone in his encounters. A group of college students once set out to disprove the legend, armed with cameras and bravado. They laughed as they filmed themselves walking into the mouth of the valley, their jokes cutting through the stillness. But the laughter didn't last. We first heard it when we reached the clearing. One of the survivors later recalled voice shaking, a low whisper, a sound that made the hair on the back of our necks stand up. We turned in every direction, but there was nothing there. Just the mist, as if it were playing tricks on us. One student claimed to see a face in the fog, a face without eyes, only deep, hollow sockets that seemed to stare directly at him. He dropped his flashlight, the beam bouncing across the ground, illuminating figures that flickered at the edge of vision before dissolving back into the gloom. The camera cuts rapidly between close-ups of widened, terrified eyes and the encroaching mist, building the tension. Others spoke of feeling followed. A man named Martin Reyes, who often hiked alone, described a day when he ventured further than he intended. I kept seeing shadows, like people walking just out of reach. At first, I thought it was fatigue playing tricks on me, but then I heard footsteps that mirrored mine, stopping when I stopped, moving when I moved. And then came the night when a seasoned park ranger, Julia Pratt, found herself called to search for a missing camper. She knew the forest well, knew the stories, but always maintained an air of skepticism. That night, as her flashlight cut through the dense fog, she heard it. A soft, rhythmic thumping, like a heartbeat, and voices that didn't seem to come from any one direction. "They're here," a voice whispered, so close she could almost feel its breath on her ear. She spun around, but the mist swallowed everything whole. The camper was found the next morning, wandering near the edge of the valley in a trance, his eyes glassy, lips moving silently. Witnesses swore he whispered one sentence over and over, "They're coming for us all." I stood at the entrance to Hidden Valley, my breath visible in the crisp, cold air. The landscape before me was both beautiful and terrifying, a masterpiece crafted by nature, or something more. The cliffs loomed high and jagged, their dark faces carved by time and weather into grotesque forms that seemed almost to scowl down at intruders. The trees were unlike any I had seen elsewhere, their limbs gnarled and twisted, as if caught in an eternal struggle. They whispered secrets as the wind swept through, secrets I wasn't sure I wanted to hear. The air was thick, heavy, with a silence that didn't just surround me, it pressed into me. It was a silence that thrummed with an unseen energy, one that made the fine hairs on the back of my neck rise. It felt as though the valley was watching, waiting, aware of every move I made. I took another step, and the fog parted slightly, revealing something half buried in the dirt. A stone, carved with markings that defied any language I recognized. Rumors spoke of this place as more than just cursed. Hidden Valley was said to be sacred once, until an act so dark, so desperate, changed its essence forever. The few stories that made it out told of a ritual performed by an ancient tribe during a time of great famine. They called to the spirits, not for guidance or protection, but for power, an invocation that demanded a price too steep to imagine. Those who spoke of the ritual claimed that a sacrifice was made, one who was willingly given or chosen by forces unknown. It was said that this act bound the spirits to the land, anchoring them there in torment and anger. And that was why they said, the valley never let go of those who wandered too far inside. Every inch of this place felt charged, as if the ground beneath my feet remembered. The rocks, the trees, the very air, it all carried the weight of memory, a dark and restless energy that hummed like a low, vibrating thrum just beyond hearing. As I stood there, I couldn't shake the feeling that the valley itself was alive, a sentient being that chose who entered and who never returned. They called it the valley's hunger, the way people would get lost so easily. One step too many, and it would seem as though the trail had folded in on itself, leading them deeper. Survivors, if there were any, spoke of the sensation of being pulled, of feeling time stretch and twist until day turned to night without warning. They described hearing the beating of drums, the chants that seemed to seep into their bones, pulling them forward even when their instincts screamed to turn back. I took another step, and I felt it. A shift, subtle yet profound, as if I had crossed an unseen line. The ground seemed to exhale, a sigh of recognition or warning, I couldn't tell. My flashlight flickered, casting a weak beam that barely cut through the thickening fog. For a moment I thought I saw movement. A silhouette, tall and thin, standing motionless between the trees. I blinked, and it was gone. But the feeling remained. I was not alone. There is a belief held by some that certain places carry the imprints of events long past, that emotions, fears, and intentions can seep into the very land itself. As I stood in that accursed valley, I felt the truth of it in my bones. The stories, the warnings, they were not just tales spun to frighten. They were the echoes of those who had dared to call upon the spirits, echoes that still reached out, seeking and relentless. The valley's dark secret, I realized, wasn't just in the stories told by those who had survived. It was in the ground itself, in the trees that whispered and the fog that moved with purpose. It was in the way the shadows seemed to shift when you weren't looking, and the way time felt different, as if the valley held its own rules, its own laws. What do you believe? Can a place hold memories, emotions, a history so powerful that it becomes alive? Or is it all just stories, tales woven from fear and darkness? Tell me, would you step into the valley and see for yourself? Modern technology has made it easier than ever to document the unknown, yet some places defy even the most advanced equipment. Hidden Valley is one such place. Among those who dared to enter, few stories are as unsettling as that of Alex Grant, a seasoned paranormal investigator known for his unflinching pursuit of the truth. It started off like any other investigation, Alex says, his voice steady but hollow. The first few hours were quiet, too quiet. The team spread out, setting up cameras and EMF meters, but nothing felt out of place, not yet. Then the sun began to set and the valley changed. Alex's recount grows more intense. I first noticed it when the temperature dropped suddenly, as if the air had been pulled from the space around me. I was alone near an outcropping of rocks, trying to get a reading when I felt it. A presence. It was heavy, pressing down on me, suffocating. I turned, shining my flashlight into the fog, and that's when I saw it. A shadow, tall and thin, moving with a fluidity that made no sound. It didn't walk, it glided, as if tethered to the mist itself. I tried to call out to the others, Alex continues, voice shaking, but my radio was dead. Every piece of equipment I had with me shut off at that moment, and the silence, it wasn't just quiet. It was the kind of silence that swallows sound whole. I felt it watching me, moving closer even though I couldn't see it anymore. The air grew colder, and a voice, deep and guttural, whispered right behind me, "Go." That wasn't the worst of it, Alex says, eyes wide and unblinking. It's what happened as I reached the clearing. I heard a sound like a heartbeat so deep it rattled in my chest. And then the voice came again, but this time, it wasn't telling me to leave. It said, "You are marked." Alex leans in, his expression haunted. I barely escaped that night. It felt as though the valley pushed me out, only to remind me that I was never really free. Since then, I've heard it, in the dead of night when everything is quiet. The valley calls, and once you hear it, there's no forgetting. No moving on. It draws you back again and again. They say the valley knows who enters and who doesn't belong. It marks them, weaving its way into their minds, their dreams, until they return. Alex's warning echoes through the chill of the morning air. Once it marks you, it never forgets. We've traced the steps of explorers and modern-day seekers, heard the stories of those who never returned, and listened to the warnings of those who barely escaped. Hidden Valley, with its towering cliffs, twisted trees, and restless fog, holds more than just the echoes of its past. It whispers to those who dare to enter, marking them, calling them back into its depths. But this story is far from over. The legends of Hidden Valley are but one chapter in a world filled with places where reality blurs into something far more sinister, where history refuses to stay buried. In the next journey, we'll explore other cursed lands, uncovering their secrets and the stories of those who dared to defy them. But for now, ask yourself, what if the legends are true? What if some places are meant to remain hidden? If you find yourself drawn to these tales, remember that some calls are better left unanswered. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the eerie heart of Hidden Valley. If you were captivated by the stories, the mystery, and the unanswered questions, don't stop here. Hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell to be the first to uncover more tales of haunted places, forgotten legends, and encounters that defy the boundaries of reality. Leave a comment below and let me know. Would you survive a night in Hidden Valley? Your next adventure awaits if you dare.